The night Jessica Okoye realized her marriage was a prison, rain was beating against the glass walls of the Okoye mansion like it wanted to get inside and scream for her. She stood barefoot on cold marble floors, clutching a phone that had just gone silent. Her father's doctor on the other end, his voice shaking as he said the words that would split her life cleanly in two. Her husband was not beside her. He was laughing somewhere else. If you love dark revenge stories, African drama, and tales where quiet women rise like storms, pause right now. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling us what part of the world you're watching from. These stories travel far, and tonight they start here. Jessica Okoye had never believed in fairy tales, but she had believed, foolishly, that love could wait. She was 26, bright-eyed but tired in a way that came from years of scraping hope together with bare hands. Her world was small but honest. A modest two-bedroom apartment in Surulere, a struggling fashion supply business she ran online, and a father who had been both mother and father to her since she was 9. Mr. Chinedu Okoye was a proud man. Too proud, perhaps. A retired civil servant whose pension barely arrived on time. He never complained. Even when his chest pains began, he waved them off as old age tapping me on the shoulder. Until one morning, he collapsed in their kitchen. The diagnosis came like a hammer: advanced heart disease. The surgery was urgent. The cost was impossible. Jessica sat in the hospital corridor for hours, staring at a peeling wall poster about blood pressure control, while figures ran through her head like cruel math. 18 million Nigerian nairas. She didn't have 1.8 million Nigerian nairas. She sold her laptop. She sold her sewing machine. She emptied her savings. She borrowed from friends who themselves were drowning. Still, it wasn't enough. That was when Victor Okoye stepped in, not as a savior, but as a man who had been waiting. Victor was her late mother's distant relative, a wealthy importer with a glass-walled office on Victoria Island and a reputation for getting what he wanted. He had noticed Jessica years earlier at a family gathering, noticed how soft-spoken she was, how she never demanded space, how her silence felt like permission. When he showed up at the hospital in a tailored suit, smelling faintly of expensive cologne, Jessica felt relief before fear caught up. "I can pay for the surgery," he said calmly, as if discussing lunch. Her knees nearly buckled. "Oh, God, thank you," she whispered, tears spilling freely. "I'll pay you back. I swear. I'll work day and night." Victor smiled, slow and thin. "I don't want repayment," he said. "I want you." The silence that followed was louder than the hospital alarms. "You'll marry me," he continued, voice steady. "A proper wedding. Legal. Immediate." Jessica felt the room tilt. This is not the time for jokes," she said, her voice shaking. Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Your father has weeks, Jessica. Maybe days. The surgeon won't wait. Neither will I." She begged. She cried. She tried to leave. But every time she looked through the ICU glass and saw her father, tubes in his chest, his breath measured by machines, her resistance broke apart. That night, she signed the papers. No engagement party. Oh joy. Just desperation dressed in white. The wedding took place 2 weeks later. It was small but expensive. Victor insisted on photographs, on smiles, on the performance of happiness. Jessica wore a borrowed gown that felt heavier than armor. Her father was wheeled in briefly, too weak to stand, his eyes shining with guilt and gratitude. "My daughter," he whispered, gripping her hand. "You didn't have to." Jessica smiled, so he wouldn't see the lie breaking her heart. "I'm happy, Papa," she said. At IT was the first time she lied to him. Victor paid the hospital the same day. The surgery went smoothly. Doctors called it a miracle. For the first time in months, Jessica slept without fear. But peace, she would learn, is not the same as safety. A month later, her father died. It happened quietly, cruelly ordinary. A sudden complication, an infection, a phone call at 5:12 a.m. Jessica arrived at the hospital too late to hear his voice. She held his cold hand and screamed until nurses pulled her away. Victor did not cry. He stood at a distance during the burial, sunglasses hiding his eyes, accepting condolences like a king receiving tribute. When it was over, when the last shovel of earth hit the grave, he leaned down to Jessica and whispered, "You have no one now but me." That was the moment her isolation became complete. Grief did not soften Victor Okoye. It sharpened him. In the weeks after Mr. Chinedu Okoye's burial, the house on Victoria Island became unbearably quiet, not with peace, but with tension, like a room holding its breath before a slap. Jessica moved through the mansion like a ghost, wrapped in black, eyes swollen, her body still moving on habit while her spirit lagged far behind. Victor noticed everything and used it. It started small, a look of irritation when she spoke too slowly, a sigh when she asked permission to visit her father's grave, a comment here, a correction there. "You're wasting food," he snapped one evening, pushing his plate away. "Do you know how much this costs?" I didn't know you didn't want rice tonight," Jessica said softly. He laughed, sharp and humorless. "You don't know much, do you?" Soon, the house rules multiplied. Jessica was no longer allowed to leave without informing him. Her phone calls were monitored. Her small business, already suffering from grief, was dismissed as a hobby she could no longer afford. "You're a wife now," Victor said one morning, adjusting his cufflinks while she stood by the mirror, tying her headscarf. Not some village girl hustling online. The words stung, but she swallowed them. Grief had taught her silence. Whenever she tried to push back, Victor reminded her of the past like a weapon. "Do you remember where you would be without me?" he asked casually, swirling wine in his glass. "Do you remember the hospital bills? Do you remember who saved your father?" Jessica would nod, throat tight. He said it so often that the memory of her father began to feel like a debt ledger, his life converted into Victor's ownership over her. "You owe me everything," Victor told her one night after she forgot to iron his shirt. "Your comfort, your name, your survival." The mansion that once looked like success now felt like a beautifully furnished cage. And Victor was the key. The day Jessica overheard the truth, it was raining again. She had just returned from the market, arms aching with bags. Victor insisted she carry herself. "To stay humble," he said. The generator hummed loudly, drowning out most sounds, so she didn't hear the voices at first. Then she laughed. Not Jessica's laugh. A woman's, bright, careless, familiar. Jessica slowed at the staircase. Victor's voice followed, lower, intimate in a way it had not been with her in months. "You should see her face when I remind her," he said, amused. "Like a stray dog that knows it has nowhere else to go." Jessica's fingers tightened around the bag handles. "Victor," the woman giggled. "That's wicked." Celine Grant stepped into view as Jessica edged closer to the half-closed study door. Tall, polished, beautiful in the effortless way money buys. She sat on Victor's desk like she owned the place, legs crossed, red heels dangling. "And she really thinks you love her?" Celine asked. Victor scoffed. "Love? I married her because she was desperate. Poor, easy to control." Jessica's heart slammed so hard she thought they might hear it. "She had no family," Victor continued. "No money, no backbone. Perfect." Celine laughed again. "You're terrible." "I'm practical," he corrected. "Women like Jessica don't leave." "Where'd she go? Back to poverty?" "Back to graves." The words sliced clean through her. Jessica leaned against the wall, breath shallow, every sound amplified. The house seemed to tilt, just like the day he made his offer in the hospital corridor. Celine's voice softened. "And what about me?" Victor stood, moving closer to Celine, his tone changing. "You know you're different. You choose me." She had no choice. They kissed. Jessica closed her eyes. For a moment, just one, she thought she might scream, rush in, break something. But grief had trained her well. Silence had kept her alive. She stepped back quietly, leaving the bags where they were. As she retreated to the guest room Victor had long since banished her to, one thought repeated in her mind, steady and terrifying in its calm. "So this is what he thinks of me." That night, Jessica did not cry. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every insult, every reminder, every smirk. For the first time since her father's death, something else bloomed beneath the sorrow. clarity. Victor had not married her out of kindness. He had chosen her because he believed she was powerless. And that belief, she realized slowly, deliberately, was his greatest mistake. Jessica turned her face to the window, rain streaking down the glass like whispered promises. She did not know yet how she would leave. She did not know yet how she would survive. But she knew this. She would never be a stray dog again. And she would wait. Waiting, Jessica learned, was an art her grandmother had mastered long before she was born. Madame Ifeanyi Okori had been many things in her lifetime. Trader, landowner, widow, and in certain whispered circles, a woman no one ever managed to cheat twice. As a child, Jessica had loved sitting at her feet in the old family house in Anambra, listening to stories told in proverbs and pauses. A woman who rushes exposes her ankles, her grandmother used to say, but the one who waits sees the road clearly. Jessica had not understood then. She understood now. The memory came to her one quiet afternoon, nearly a year into her marriage, as she sat alone in the mansion's back veranda. Victor had traveled. He always traveled lately, and the house breathed easier in his absence. Jessica found herself thinking of the past, of the funeral she had never truly mourned. Madame Ifeanyi had died 3 years before Jessica married Victor. The will reading had been brief, almost disappointing. A few sentimental items, jewelry, books, a sealed letter handed to Jessica by a lawyer whose name she barely remembered. "You will understand this when the time is right," he had said. Jessica had tucked the letter away and forgotten it. Life had been too busy surviving. Until now. She retrieved it from the bottom of her old storage box that evening, her hands trembling as she broke the wax seal she had once been too afraid to touch. Inside was a second envelope, and a document. Jessica read slowly, her breath catching with every line. Her grandmother had not been poor. She had been patient. Properties, farmland, commercial buildings, long-term investments, cash reserves quietly growing over decades. The total value made Jessica's head spin, but there was a condition. The inheritance shall be released only after the beneficiary has been married for 3 full years. Jessica sat back, stunned. The letter from her grandmother followed, written in firm, looping handwriting. Marriage reveals character faster than poverty ever will. If the man you marry honors you, this wealth will protect your future together. If he does not, it will protect you from him. Jessica pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears fell, not of sorrow, but of recognition. Her grandmother had known that Jessica's softness might one day be mistaken for weakness, known that the world was not kind to women who loved too quickly or trusted too deeply, known that power, when given too early, could blind instead of save. Victor still didn't know, and Jessica made sure he never suspected. The second year of marriage passed like a slow-burning fever. Jessica became quieter, gentler, more agreeable. Victor mistook her calm for defeat. She learned his routines, his lies, the rhythm of his betrayals. She learned which days Celine visited, which lies he used on which women, how money moved in and out of his accounts like a magician's trick. Victor grew careless. He stopped hiding his contempt. "Do you know how lucky you are?" he asked one morning as she served a breakfast. "Women like you don't get men like me." Jessica nodded. "I know." Inside, she was counting days. She watched him cheat openly now, late nights, perfume stains, unexplained charges. She saved messages, screenshots, receipts. She recorded conversations when he forgot himself and spoke too freely. Victor loved the sound of his own voice. "Marriage is about control," he told a friend once over speakerphone, not realizing Jessica was within earshot. "If a woman thinks she can leave, you've already lost." Jessica listened, expression blank, mind sharp. She watched him manipulate employees at his company, delay salaries, pressure suppliers, cut corners. She watched Apex Mercantile wobble beneath arrogance, disguised as confidence. Victor came home angrier each month. Business wasn't going well, and he needed someone to bleed. "You think money grows on trees?" he shouted once when she questioned a missing allowance. "Remember where you came from." Jessica flinched on purpose, lowered her gaze, apologized. He liked that. At night, when Victor slept beside her without touching her, she lay awake counting memories instead of sheep. Each insult became a ledger entry. Each humiliation, a receipt. Each reminder of her debt, another reason not to forget. The third year arrived quietly. Victor forgot their anniversary. He left that morning without a word, without a gift, without even a glance. Jessica watched his car disappear down the long driveway and felt something inside her settle into place. That evening, she lit a single candle in the guest room and whispered, almost reverently, 3 years. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She only reached for her phone. Somewhere in the city, a lawyer still remembered a promise made by a woman who believed in patience. And Jessica Okoye was finally ready to stop waiting. Jessica waited 2 weeks after the forgotten anniversary. Not because she needed more time, but because patience, she had learned, sharpened power. Those 14 days were ordinary on the surface. She cooked. She cleaned. She spoke when spoken to. Victor barely noticed her existence, too consumed with phone calls, pacing, and the kind of anger that smelled like fear. On the 15th day, Jessica woke before dawn. The mansion was silent except for the low hum of electricity and the distant ocean breeze. She sat at the small desk in the guest room, the room Victor had relegated her to after claiming he needed space to think, and stared at her phone for a long moment. Then she dialed. The line rang twice. "Good morning," a calm male voice answered. "This is Caldwell Reyes." Jessica inhaled. "You once represented Madam Ifeanyi Okere." There was a pause, brief, deliberate. "Yes," he said carefully. "Who is calling?" "Jessica Okoye," she replied. "Her granddaughter." This time, the silence stretched longer. "I was wondering when you would call," Mr. Reyes said at last. "Are you married?" "Yes," Jessica said. "For how long?" 3 years and 2 weeks. She heard him exhale. "Then the inheritance can be activated," he said. "If you're ready." Jessica closed her eyes. "I am." They met 3 days later in a discreet office building on the mainland, far from Victor's world of glass towers and loud confidence. Mr. Reyes was older than she remembered, his hair grayer, his eyes sharp with the kind of patience earned from watching people reveal themselves over time. He slid a folder across the desk. "Your grandmother was very specific," he said. "She anticipated resistance, interference, manipulation. Everything has been structured to protect you." Jessica flipped through documents that felt unreal in her hands. Deeds, share certificates, investment portfolios, bank confirmations. The numbers blurred at first. Then they settled. $5 million. And more, because time had been kind of money that was never rushed. "You are now the sole controller of these assets," Mr. Reyes continued. "No spouse's access. No disclosure is required. Everything is legally insulated." Jessica looked up. "Victor can't touch any of it." "He doesn't even need to know," Mr. Reyes said gently, "unless you choose to tell him." She nodded slowly. They spent hours reviewing details. Properties across states, farmland producing steady income, minority stakes in quiet but profitable companies. Her grandmother had not only built wealth, she had hidden it in plain sight. By the time Jessica left the office, her name no longer felt small in her mouth. She walked differently, not proudly, not loudly, but solidly. That night, Victor ranted over dinner about money. "They're squeezing me," he complained, stabbing his food. "Banks, investors, everyone wants guarantees." Jessica murmured sympathy, eyes lowered. Inside, something ancient and steady had awakened. Power, Jessica soon learned, changed what she could see. With access to her grandmother's networks came access to information. Quiet information passed between people who understood discretion as a language. She didn't ask directly at first. She listened. Victor's company, Apex Mercantile, was not as strong as he pretended. On the surface, it still looked impressive. Glossy brochures, polished executives, an office full of ambition and noise. But underneath, the foundation was cracking. Unpaid suppliers, Delayed shipments, mounting debt masked by short-term loans. Jessica sat in a quiet cafe one afternoon, sipping tea as she read through a report sent by one of Mr. Reyes's financial analysts. Her hands were steady. Apex Mercantile was bleeding. Victor had expanded too quickly, chasing prestige over stability. He had borrowed heavily to impress the wrong people. Now interest was eating him alive, and he was desperate. That explained the late nights, the shouting matches, the fear he tried to bury under cruelty. One evening, Victor came home pale, loosening his tie with shaking hands. "They want a bailout," he said to no one in particular. "Investors, private ones, silent partners." Jessica poured him water. "Will you get it?" she asked softly. Victor scoffed. "Of course. I always do." But his eyes betrayed him. Over the next few days, the house buzzed with urgency. Victor took calls at odd hours. He snapped at staff. He barely looked at Jessica, except to bark orders or lash out. "Do you know what pressure feels like?" he shouted one night when she asked if he wanted dinner. "You sit at home doing nothing while I carry this family." Jessica apologized. Later that night, alone in the guest room, she opened her laptop. Mr. Reyes had already anticipated this. Together, they formed a holding company, anonymous, carefully layered, untraceable to her name. It moved quietly, the way serious money always did. When Apex Mercantile quietly announced it was open to strategic investment, Jessica was ready. She did not rush. She let Victor sweat. She let the company's value dip just enough to make the offer irresistible. Then she moved, through intermediaries and sealed agreements. Her holding company acquired shares, first small, then significant. No alarms, no suspicion, just another silent investor stepping in when others hesitated. By the time Victor celebrated securing a miracle deal that would save the company, Jessica owned 60% of Apex Mercantile. Control. He toasted that night, laughing loudly, relief pouring from him like wine. "To new beginnings," Victor declared. Jessica raised her glass. "To patience," she said quietly. Victor didn't hear her. He never noticed that the woman he believed powerless was now standing at the center of his empire, unseen, unrecognized, and entirely in control. And Jessica Okoye smiled for the first time in 3 years. Not because the battle was over, but because it had finally begun. Power does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it slips into a room unnoticed, takes a seat at the head of the table, and waits for everyone else to finish talking. Jessica Okoye became that power. The acquisition of Apex Mercantile happened in layers, quiet, methodical, invisible. Through her holding company, Arden Ridge Holdings, contracts were signed by proxies. Funds released through channels Victor had never bothered to trace because desperation had made him careless. To Victor, it was a miracle. To Jessica, it was arithmetic. 60%. That was all it took. Not a hostile takeover. Not a scandal. Just ownership. Victor strutted around the house again, confidence returning like a bad habit. He bought expensive wine, laughed loudly into his phone, and told anyone who would listen that Apex Mercantile had weathered the storm. "They tried to break me," he boasted one evening, "but I'm not a man who falls." Jessica smiled politely from across the room, folding laundry. At the office, changes began immediately. The board announced restructuring, audits, policy reviews, a new majority stakeholder with strict governance values. Victor cursed the anonymity of it all, but had no choice. The deal had saved his company. He couldn't complain too loudly. Yet something fell off. His authority was suddenly questioned. Decisions he once made freely now required approval. Expenses were scrutinized. Deals delayed. Victor grew frustrated. "Who the hell are these people?" he snapped at his CFO. "This investor. Why won't they show their face?" The CFO shrugged nervously. "They're within their rights. They own the company." Victor slammed his fist on the desk. He had no idea how close the truth was sitting to him every night at dinner. Jessica, meanwhile, became meticulous. She compiled everything. Every insult recorded on voice notes. Every message from Celine saved and backed up. Every financial manipulation documented. every witness willing to speak. She met quietly with lawyers, her own this time, not men who saw her as a wife or an accessory, but professionals who addressed her as Ms. Okoye and waited for her to finish speaking. They reviewed the evidence carefully. "This is strong," one said. "Very strong. Emotional abuse, financial control, infidelity. You can walk away clean." Jessica nodded. "I don't want to walk away," she said calmly. "I want to end it. On her terms." Jessica chose the day carefully. Apex Mercantile's quarterly executive meeting. Victor insisted she attend. "We're something nice," he said dismissively. "You'll sit quietly at the back. Don't embarrass me." Jessica agreed. She wore white, not the soft, apologetic white of surrender, but crisp, deliberate white. The kind worn by women who had buried the past and were ready to testify against it. The boardroom buzzed with tension. Executives whispered. Laptops glowed. Victor sat at the head of the table, smiling too hard. The meeting began as usual. Figures, projections, cautious optimism. Then the chairman cleared his throat. "There is one final agenda item," he said. "Our majority shareholder has requested to address the board." Victor stiffened. Jessica stood. Every head turned. Victor frowned. "Jessica, sit down. This is not." "I believe it is," she said, her voice calm, carrying easily across the room. She walked forward, slowly, deliberately. The chairman gestured to her. "Ms. Okoye, please." Victor's face drained of color. "What is this nonsense?" he snapped, standing halfway. "This is my wife. And I am also," Jessica continued, "the owner of 60% of Apex Mercantile." The room exploded into murmurs. Victor laughed, one sharp, disbelieving sound. "That's impossible." Jessica placed a folder on the table. "Check the documents," she said gently. The chairman opened it, nodded. "Everything is in order." Victor stared at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. His voice cracked. "You can't." "Where did you?" "My grandmother," Jessica said. "The one you never bothered to ask about." Silence swallowed the room. Jessica turned to face him fully now, years of restraint holding her spine straight. "For 3 years, you told me I owed you my life," she said. "You told me I was nothing without you. You told me I couldn't leave." She gestured to the screen. The projector flickered on. Audio played. Victor's voice, cruel, mocking, unmistakable. "She's too poor to leave." Where would she go? Then messages appeared. Photos, dates, names. Celine Grant among them. Gasps rippled through the room. "This meeting," Jessica said evenly, "is now adjourned." She turned back to the chairman. "Effective immediately, I am initiating a leadership review and restructuring process." The chairman nodded. "So noted." Victor staggered back into his chair. Later that evening, at home, there was no audience. No board. No witnesses. Just truth. Victor paced the living room, rage and panic tangling in his movements. "You planned this," he accused. "You used me." Jessica stood by the window, looking out at the city she once feared. "No," she said. "You used yourself." She handed him an envelope. "Divorce papers. And these," she added, placing another folder beside it. "Evidence. If you contest this divorce, everything goes public." Victor's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked small. "You wouldn't survive without me," he muttered weakly. Jessica met his eyes. "I already did." She walked past him. Out of the house. Out of the marriage. Out of the lie. The gates closed behind her with a soft, final sound. Jessica Okoye did not look back. Because revenge had never been about destruction. It had been about reclamation. And her life, at last, was hers.